Welcome to Dialogue Podcast. I'm your host, Rebecca Sebastian, and this is the Interview True Crime Podcast where I talk to the leading voices in crime, culture, and justice. We're continuing on our series called Crime Conversations. So it's interviews with people I met with and connected with at CrimeCon. And today's interview is a special one. It's a bit of a heartbreaker, but it's really important that we don't not listen to stories like this because they're too hard or too sad or they make you feel too helpless. I know that feeling and I honor that feeling. I acknowledge it. It also doesn't help anybody or anything. So this is a story of a father whose son is missing. I am speaking with David Robinson, and you may have heard of his son, Daniel Robinson's story. There has been some national media coverage. There has been a lot of movement on social media, but that coverage was hard won and only came about from my guest David's relentless determination to get his son's name out there. Daniel has been missing for 11 months at the time of this recording. We are 1 month away from it being a year. David's going to walk us through what happened that day, what happened and what didn't happen during the investigation, and where he is right now with search efforts, his 501c3, and most importantly, ways we can all help. And just remember, at the heart of every true crime story are actual people who have experienced the worst day of their lives. So this is one of those. And again, I would urge you to push past the discomfort of that. If you're one of those people who's like, I don't like missing person stories, they're unresolved, they're too sad, I get it. I actually really relate to that. And I myself am having to challenge myself and push past that a bit because it's too important. I'm choosing to hold on to some hope. And if nothing else, to come alongside parents like David, who really should not feel as alone as they do. Please check the show notes for all the resources that David mentions at the end of the episode. I will be posting this a lot on social media, so please follow me at Dialogue Pod on Twitter and Instagram. And please follow David's account on Twitter at Please Help Find 4, the number 4, at Please Help Find 4. The website is pleasehelpfinddaniel.com. Again, we will list this in the episode and in the show notes. With that, here is my interview with David Robinson. Okay, David, welcome to Dialogue Podcast. I'm honored to have you here today.
Thank you for having me on.
You're welcome. I came to know your story and your son's story, Daniel, a few weeks before CrimeCon. And then unfortunately, I wasn't able to get to you at CrimeCon. There was a lot going on there for you, for everybody. Thrilled that you were able to be on the stage there to share Daniel's story. So I thought for anyone who wasn't there or who hasn't heard yet, could you talk about your son, Daniel, when he went missing and maybe lay the story out a little bit for us, and then we'll go from there.
Yes, sure. No, Daniel, he's a geologist. Before that, of course, he's the youngest of his other 3 siblings. They have twin sisters that's older than he is and an older brother. Daniel grew up in the household where, of course, he had his own challenges. He was born without a right hand. He quickly accomplished teaching us as a family that he can do anything regardless of what we would think is a defect. Daniel, like I say, he achieved in everything he wanted to do, from teaching himself how to play the French horn, and also playing a little bit of sports too. When he got into his academic situations, like I say, he always challenged his siblings, so he wanted to be better than they are, looking up. So academic-wise, he started going to the College of Charleston in Charleston, South Carolina in his freshman year. He made a final decision on his choice of geology. He graduated with honors. He also is a founder of a fraternity there. Daniel is a person who's, of course, like to be around a lot of friends and things like that. So his aspiration and goal is to, achieve his dreams. His dreams, like I say, in geology, to travel abroad, to become a millionaire before he's 30. So, he just have all these things. He loved nature and things like that. But, of course, he landed his first job out in Phoenix, Arizona, right after college, hired on it with an engineering company called Matrix New World, also called Matrix Southwest Groundwater, where they hired him as a field geologist. Is also called a hydrogeologist because his job is he get assignments to go out to various well sites across Arizona to check the viability of these wells, to make sure that the water is safe to drink. And also by law in communities, future communities in those deserts out there, the state of Arizona require these communities to have wells, and these wells have to produce at least 100 years of water. So his job is to determine that, and also, like I said, the water is drinkable. Yeah, coming up to him missing, he was doing his job on June the 23rd. He went to 2 well sites, one at 7 a.m. The next was at 9 o'clock. And at 9 o'clock one, he was meeting with a worker from a company called Weber named Kenneth. Kenneth, from that point, the narrative started from his testimony. He said my son met him out there on Sun Valley Parkway. They had a brief conversation out there because my son was directing my son into the wells. My son had never been out there before. So they met on the roadway, talk a little bit. My son followed him into that desert. They had to go 1 mile west, and then they had to go 2 miles north to get to this well site. Once they arrived at the well site, it was roughly around 9 o'clock that morning. They had a roughly, I think he said, about 10-minute conversation and about the weather, to my son wanting to go back to Phoenix, for him to see if he wanted to go back to rest, that type deal. He said my son pretty much just waved off and drove off, and we have never seen my son since.
Okay, so that was 2021. You said June.
That's
so
right.
Coming up on 1 year. And
That's right.
So Arizona desert, June, already probably blazing hot. How often did his workday take him out into the field like that? That was his primary day? That was typical?
He rarely ever go into the office. The only times they really go in the office, the field geologist does, is just to return those samples that they pull from the wells. They have a table there, they drop them off and keep moving. So yes, that's typical. That's what he does.
And his car, is that a personal vehicle or a vehicle from the company?
Yeah, it's a personal vehicle.
So from there, his colleague doesn't see him again. At what point are you alerted that he's not where he should be?
Well, on June 23rd in South Carolina, I did get a call from my daughter. She's also in Arizona. She's in Phoenix, one of his twin sisters. She called me worried about Daniel because one of the coworkers from his job came to her apartment. She was really puzzled why they knew where she lived, but at the same time, she do remember him because Daniel brought him there once before. And he was asking her his location. I guess he described that he wasn't seen at the well site since 9 o'clock that morning. So, of course, that alarmed her. She called me to get advice. I told her go ahead and go check at his apartment, make sure that he's not there. In the meantime, I was making phone calls. Of course, Daniel wasn't answering his phone. And so that didn't really alarm me too bad until I look at the time difference from South Carolina to Arizona, which is a 3-hour difference this time of the year. And I realized that it was over 6 hours that nobody have seen Daniel. So that's when I got alerted. And then I got worried about it.
And was his phone ringing or going straight to voicemail when you tried him?
It was ringing. His phone had been ringing for at least almost a full day, a little over a full day before it started going straight to voicemail.
Okay. And so what do you do? I mean, a parent, I have older kids. It's like they're 25 or they're 5. You're still there. It's your baby.
That's right.
How quick do you go to Arizona?
Well, first I had did my due diligence, try to find out what was going on. I did call the Tempe. My son was a resident of Tempe, Arizona. I called the Tempe police to put in a report, and they told me because went missing out there. Only information I had time was the White Tank Mountains. I never heard of Sun Valley Parkway at the time. So they told me, hey, look, you have to put a missing person report with Buckeye Police Department. They gave me I tried it, and they told me I had to wait the 12 hours, which was about 3 hours later. So I waited for the 3 hours, and then I called back. They said they was going to go out, and I didn't have information just saying he was near the White Tank Mountains. That's when I first heard of Sun Valley Parkway. The officer said he was going to go ride up and down Sun Valley Parkway to see if he's on the side of the road. I was relieved until I also was talking to a coworker, and they said, no, he was in the desert. He was last seen in the desert off of Sun Valley Parkway. And that's when I asked the officers to go out there to search for him that night. They told me they couldn't because it was nighttime. They couldn't put a bird in the air, but they would do it early that morning. I stayed up all night. The next morning, a new officer came in. His name was Officer Haley. He told me, hey, we're going to put a bird in the air, but then they changed it. An hour later, called and said, no, he said his higher-ups canceled the flight. It was unauthorized because they said he's a grown man and he can leave on his own. That would prompt me to grab everything I had and put in my vehicle and started headed west.
Okay, so let's start with this arbitrary 12-hour nonsense. I'm so sick of hearing this in stories like this time and again. It used to be 48 hours, 24 hours, 12 hours. It seems so arbitrary. It's like, I just don't, I understand, deploying resources when it ends up being somebody found perfectly fine. To me, it's money well spent to me. I don't know. This bothers me so much. So for you to literally wait 3 more hours and then you can make the call again, like that's what you need to be doing. And then they finally start. And then there's this change in plan. They wouldn't approve the helicopter because of his age. He's not a minor or he's not a young adult. I guess they're considering him. It's not a high level risk. So that's when you decide to go. What is your gut telling you? Because is he a communicative kid? Is this very out of character? What are his colleagues saying at this point?
It's definitely well out of character. Like I tell people, my family, we have a really close-knit family. Our dynamics is really great. That's the reason why my children, for instance, they all share passwords. They know each other's password. They know everything. So the thing is, our dynamics is, of course, me and Daniel's mother is not married anymore. We're divorced, but we're very much good friends. But like I said, my conversation person is speaking on my behalf. When I talk to Daniel, we have our 2-hour conversation every time, not one time, but every time. I hear from him at least twice a week, at least. And then, Daniel always let us know what he's doing. I mean, he's just that person. We all that person. If I was to go, I wouldn't leave anywhere without somebody knowing where I'm at. So that's the way we are. And those things was very important to the family because I did reach out to his mother that day, also reached out to his siblings and some other folks, his friends. So, we all agreed Daniel would not just walk off from his job site. Matter of fact, the way Daniel's mind is, he wouldn't have went to the first well site if he wanted to go away from the second well site. So, there's some of those things we know about him, his character.
And now, was there anything the company could do if the police couldn't, execute a search right away? Could the company say like, hey, this is still on our clock? What was their response to coming to assist?
Once I got to Arizona, that's one of the first people I had several board meetings with my sons. And that's some of the questions the family have. We're like, hey, look, I had to come over to Arizona, end up starting my own searches to what have they done? And they haven't done anything. They haven't done anything in terms, and that's one of the things I was speaking with the owners is like, hey, this is your worker. He's my son, but at the same time, he's, like you said, on your clock. If that's my company, I'll take every resource and burn every resource I can. And it's a very wealthy company to be able to go out there and search for my worker. And they haven't done that. And that's one thing that I was very disappointed with the company once I did get that information.
That is so disappointing and really surprising because you would almost think just selfishly, if you want to look at it as like PR for them, not a good look. Okay, so the law enforcement isn't going to do the chopper search. What will they do? What is the next thing that happens?
Well, once I left South Carolina, started heading out west. I got there on June the 26th, right when I was just pulling up into Phoenix. I did get a call from my auntie. She was really excited. She said she convinced them. I don't know what she said to them, but they said it's going to put this Phoenix Firebird in the air, which is almost 3 days later, they decided to do so. I was really relieved and happy about that. But at the same time, at the moment, I did not think that, remember that it was almost 3 days. But yeah, I was really happy that they did put something in the air to go. Of course, they came back empty-handed. But, of course, from that point, that's the only search they have done outside of the net search they did almost 2 weeks later.
So I've seen you in doing my research and heard some of your interviews at CrimeCon. Like, you've done so much in these 11 months. Are you saying you've done it completely independently outside of law enforcement?
That's exactly correct. That's right. One of my motivation is my son. I'm a father. Any mother, father, we're going to go after our children. Like you said, no matter what their age, to me, he's still my baby. Yeah. And, have to go out there and make sure we're protecting them any way we can. The only thing that was keeping me from my son at that moment was the desert. Once I found out more details when I got to Arizona, the one thing I found out is about that desert. I'm a veteran, Afghanistan veteran, and I know about deserts. That desert terrain is a lot different. So I was doing all my due diligence, homework, find everything I can about that desert and made a plan to get boots on the ground to search for my son.
What are those differences? Like, what did you have to plan for when you started bringing people out?
Well, one of the things is we always got to have, our recon. We have to get out there and see what we're expecting. So being that I couldn't actually get out there on foot, I used to go out there daily off Sun Valley Parkway, looking with my binoculars, try to get a sense of that terrain. It looked flat from the road, but I did do my research, and there's a whole lot of things there, like, for instance, ravines to washes, you name it. I had to know what each of those things were. In Afghanistan, they didn't have things like that. The vegetation is there in that desert. So, those type things, I want to make sure when I put people out there, they would be safe. That's one of the biggest things we learn in the military. You do that recon to make sure, how you're going to make a plan to make sure everybody's safe.
So how did you, it must be your military background combined with like a father's, relentless dedication, but how did you have the wherewithal to make a plan? Because we're going to talk about, there's been some case updates along the way. You've had some traction, but you had to initially mobilize an idea and people. Like, how did you do that in the face of the agony of not knowing where he is?
Well, I made my mind up once I left South Carolina. I treated my son's case missing like a mission. We learn our training. We got to put the mission first. That means that sometimes you got to put your emotions aside. You really have to, because you become complacent and it throw you off. So, it may sound like that. I know we're not robots, and we definitely have to we have emotions. I do have emotions, and I'm really hurt. I have to make sure I stay physically fit and mentally straight, so I can be effective for my son. So I made that decision to approach my son's disappearance exactly what I would do when I was in Afghanistan, and I've been continuing with that. So once I got to Arizona, of course, I didn't know anybody. I had my daughter living there, but I just make sure, because she's looking up to me, to do something. Yeah. And also, so I had to make sure that I did everything. That's no sleep, but I had to make sure I reach out to anybody and everybody I can who knows about that terrain, who lives out there in Buckeye, who's out there all the time, that type of stuff. And I can learn as I was putting things together.
And what do you make of the lack of support from law enforcement? Other than they're saying he's older, he's of age, he's an adult, maybe he could have left by his own, choice. Do you feel like that's all there is to it? Because it just seems so strange to me.
And that's hurtful. It was hurtful to our family, because, they made a quick assumption, based on nothing. Danny didn't come to them and say, hey, I want to disappear on my own. They had no letter written or anything that would indicate that he wanted to leave on his own. The only thing they had to go by was as a family, our opinion about it. My son was just making plans to be with his sister that weekend. Me and him talked on the phone. He just finished building his computer. Certain little things that was going on at the moment. 2 days to 3 days leading up to him disappearing didn't equate to him just wanting to disappear. So just that whole assumption that they came up with for them to say, hey, I'm not going to go look for Daniel, that was problematic, at the beginning. So they already had their mind made up that he's a grown man, he wanted to disappear. That was a problem.
I did a series about the imbalance of media coverage and law enforcement support for women of color in particular that go missing or are murdered and it's unsolved. Did you feel that any of this, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I would love for you to be honest about it. Do you feel like that's at play, that this is a young Black man and on the priority list, they moved it lower because of that?
Well, it was very hard to even, in my moments when I was out there trying to find ways to get people out there on the ground, mobilize people to come out and help me search. I was so busy getting Daniel's name out there, trying to get media coverage to, you name it, doing all at one time, trying to get resources and things like that. It never dawned on me until the Petito case. Of course, when Daniel's case went national, they did ask questions like that. I learned of the Petito case just by somebody pretty much almost tapping me on the shoulder. I was so busy on my own. My son, I didn't know about it. I didn't get to watch news and things like that. But when I learned about it, of course, the only thing I could think of is another family going through the same thing we're going through. The young lady, at the time, I realized she was near my son's age. But then people say, hey, no, look at this. So they on news every day, 24-hour, 7-day type deal. I did feel some kind of a way. I've been working for 3 months trying to get my son's name out there, trying to get some outside resources to come in, the FBI, to whoever, to come out and search for my son. So I did feel some sense of way. However, the mindset of the police department, I cannot say, but I can say statistic-wise, it would suggest that, those things go unheard and things like that because of race. So that's what I've been learning since, I've been looking for my son.
Dialogue Podcast is sponsored in part by She's Birdie. I love She's Birdie. What is She's Birdie? It's a personal alarm that is most importantly easy to use and effective. The alarm is loud and easy to activate when you need to, but impossible to activate accidentally. This is really important. It's also not a hard plastic. It has that kind of silicone, soft, velvety cover around it, so it doesn't slip and slide all over the place. It's got a nice grip in your hand. Not as important, but worth mentioning, they're really cute. The founders worked hard to design a product that you don't mind wearing on your handbag or gym bag or car keys. Each one comes with a beautiful brass ring, and the alarms themselves come in really fun colors, but also a dark charcoal, which reads as black, which is definitely the one I have. But right now they came out with new spring designs, including blue with little flowers, white with little strawberries, super adorable designs. And if all of that weren't enough, She's Birdie gives back every time you buy one. To date, they've given over $50,000 to local women's shelters and assist in changing legislation to protect victims of abuse and violence. Don't wait. Prepare yourself and the people you love with a She's Birdie personal alarm now. Dialogue listeners get 10% off when they use the code DIEHARD. Go to shesbirdie.com and use the code DIEHARD, DIEHARD, for 10% off at checkout. That 10% applies even on top of a sale. There's just no reason not to have a She's Birdie. Again, it's shesbirdie.com, code DIEHARD. Hey listeners, I want to tell you something that you might not know about me. I like reality TV. I might even say I love it. Not as much as true crime, but a lot. And I want to tell you about a podcast that I think you might like if you too sometimes want to escape into reality television. It's produced by People Magazine, and it's called People Every Day. It's hosted by their editor, Janine Rubenstein, and it's just a great fun mix of popular celebrity culture and also some human interest stories mixed in with interviews, feature stories, and entertainment news. You're going to find episodes about unpacking Britney Spears' conservatorship, which, we've done here on Dialogue, culture scandals. I mean, you can't have a culture without cult, so already interested. And exclusive interviews with A-listers like Julianne Moore, The Rock, Chelsea Clinton, and many more. People Every Day is your daily dose of pop culture and what makes us human. You can listen to People Every Day wherever you get podcasts.
It's funny, the inverse of what happened to you happened to me. I learned about Daniel's case. It kind of popped up in the midst of the Gabby Petito coverage. It was like the whole country was stopped to look at that case, and people were going, hey, also this guy and this woman. And they discovered, I think, 9 bodies in the area where she last was while looking for her. Wow. And you just think of all the nameless people that we weren't searching for. And this is not to take away from her search and her story and her family, who is now helping other families. It's just, you can't care about something you don't know about, is what I always think about. And that's why we need to get these names out there. So what was a big breakthrough for you to pushing through to national coverage? Like, how did Daniel's name finally get that visibility?
Well, like I said, it took 3 months constantly. I mean, I was up every night, all day, trying to just get the local news, the coverage. I did get one, Josh Sanders, locally, to finally, to hit the story, pitch it to his station. And that gave me some leeway. Then I started getting those interviews, but I kept pushing social media wise, especially Twitter. Twitter was my biggest outlet. I did remember a young lady retweeted a tweet, and I mentioned some things with her retweet, and that went viral. That helped. Also, I can't get to some of these people because, if you look at Twitter and some of these other accounts, you cannot send them personal messages. Right. So I found ways around that, dealing with their friends, also hitting their websites up to, visiting places. So it took a lot of legwork to just get Daniel's name to a certain point. And that was the biggest part, was to do that, because awareness is, somebody may have seen something, heard something, and you got to make sure that my son's name out there. So maybe somebody come forward and say something.
Right. Somebody could see something and not know it has any value or meaning. Right. But if they connect this dot by seeing his story somewhere, then they can do something with that information.
That's correct.
So, social media is so powerful for that. That's something else I talked about in that series, was how people can really take back some agency on social media. If they're not going to get the national news coverage, they can make a lot of noise on social media. Then the mainstream media really has to respond because again, it's a bad look if they just completely ignore that.
That's right.
What are the biggest breakthroughs so far? What are a couple of things that have happened that have come in by way of tips? Or I know there was finding his car. What are some of the plot points that happened into the search?
Well, first of all, in the searches, just like you spoke about on the Gabby Tito's case, in my searches, we found remains out there. One of the biggest parts to me of doing so, of course, it was fearful for me, wondering if it was Daniel. But, one of the biggest parts is just like you said, just to know that somehow the search for Daniel has brought other people's remains back to their family, and so the family have some sense of closure that helps out with those families. So, but at the same time, it hurt me because it suggests that the searches that I thought law enforcement was doing the 3 times they didn't produce anything. They didn't come up with construction cones. So I was wondering if you in that area while we're volunteers finding these things and the law enforcement wasn't. So it tells me a lot with the families who have missing loved ones, like you say, don't have names and things like that. It was very important that we're out there on the ground constantly. That's the reason why I wanted these searches back to search for my son, but it also helps with other families to be able to bring people back home. As in more, information about my son's case. There's a lot of information there that I have learned since I've been searching for my son. Most of those things will be answered once I get the forensics done on these vehicles, the clothing and everything, all the things that the law enforcement did not do on the scene. No forensic work was done on the scene. So those are things I'm covering right now and taking care of. But it's just that once I get those things done, I will have the answers that I have, I'll be able to make those public also.
So wait, you found there's a vehicle and some of Daniel's clothing, and who's, if I might ask, paying for the forensic testing?
It's coming out of my pockets, and it's also coming out of the generous donations of people to the GoFundMe. So, right now I had to curve my searches and I put them on pause because of that funding. I'm trying to save up for the forensic. Everybody probably know, just for one, I'm doing one at a time right now. Cell phone, $12,000, for instance. I'm using an example. That is one item. So, I have multiple items. I have the work boots, I have his clothing, his safety vest, his wallet, another additional cell phone that was found near the scene. Also his work computer, his personal computer, the whole entire vehicle, the airbags, the red transfer paint that was found on the side of the vehicle right here that's lying on the ground. Just all of that stuff. It's going to be very costly. So I'm just trying to make sure I get the funding for it.
So is there not evidence that a potential crime happened? And if there is, wouldn't that mean law enforcement would do those tests?
Yeah, I would think so. Of course, people gonna say, hey, Mr. Robinson, you're biased. I'm supposed to be biased. He's my son, first of all. Yeah. But at the same time, I had to put on, like you said, like you asked before, my detective hat. I had to put my military experience there, keep my composure and do things and look at things in a unbiased manner. Try to make sure I look at every theory that's possible, even the ludicrous theory that my son may have joined the monastery, become a monk from the Buckeye Police Department. But you know what? I had to even look into that and check monasteries just because they said it out their mouth. The thing is, I'm saying is from a standpoint of where I'm at, yes, it's a crime. It's a crime that happened with my accident reconstructionist, PI that I hired. He found a lot of evidence that would suggest the vehicle was staged there. The fact that the person who actually found my son's vehicle said the vehicle wasn't there 2 to 3 days prior, he testified to that. He had this evidence for that. And, for the department to ignore those facts and all the information that my investigator turned over to them that suggests foul play, it's really hard just to watch the department ignore those facts and don't see it the way we see it.
Are they refuting it formally and saying it could be an accident or it's likely an accident, or are they just making no comment?
Well, they just roughly publicly just saying that they believe that there's no foul play. The way they put it, no foul play happened. They have no evidence of foul play, but we gave them plenty of evidence that suggests a possibility of foul play.
Yeah. I heard in one of your interviews, you mentioned creating a, for lack of a better word, handbook for family members of loved ones who go missing, because this is a roadmap nobody hands you. You find yourself in this situation nobody wants to be in. It's a club nobody wants to be a member of, is how I've heard it described.
That's right.
Is that a healing? Again, it sounds like you're somebody who just needs to keep their mind and hands busy. Can you talk about this resource you're trying to create for other families?
Yeah, sure. Just like you said, there's a club that you don't want to be a part of. I'm retired military. You try to get away from some of those experiences that you had to do out. But, one day you're retired and this day you're out there searching for your son. Nobody is an expert, don't know what to do when that call come in that your loved one is missing. Of course, you just get thrown. I mean, my family and I, we got thrown into a situation. And, you just don't know who to turn to or where to go. So, some of those things I don't want to see other families have to go through that, trying to figure out what next step would be. There's no manual out there for that. And, that would help other families. So I did think of that. I said, you know what, from my experiences, it's a hard road. It's continuing to be a hard road. And, it would help a lot of families if they just know what steps to take first. For instance, I learned really quickly one of the first things you do, it may be hard, is to establish some form of communication, whether that's a website you need to put up about your person, because that helps people connect. And right. People will have a place to go to give information, for instance, or if you want to get a search going, saying that helps in terms of that. So, utilize those resources. But, definitely want to make sure that families playbook, in a sense, you want to call it. Hey, look, this is going on. What do I do next? And how to, get a search going, for instance, how to, whenever law enforcement fails. In my case, law enforcement failed. And, it hurts. It hurts when the people that you look up to serve and protect somehow don't see things the way they need to see it. So, definitely want to make sure other families are taken care of.
Yeah, it's such a generous posture for you to have in the midst of this. So I just really commend that. And it just seems like in these stories, law enforcement's response can vary so wildly. That's what's so frustrating is you see and hear stories where they're on it and it's like executed well and organized and intentional and consistent. And then you hear stories where it isn't. And it's so frustrating that there isn't a federal level of care that should be handled or approached to these cases. You mentioned the FBI. They would probably have to be involved if it was like a state property, or how could you get them involved?
I've been fighting for, as soon as I start realizing, the vehicles were found on July the 19th. Right, by the rancher. On July 20th, they turned it over to me, even threatening me if I didn't get out the compound, it's going to charge me storage fees and stuff like that, right? So, after they gave me everything, they gave me final police report, so they didn't have a case. They had no Melissa follow and told my investigator that they have no investigation. Of course, my investigation still was going, his investigation was going, and I needed the FBI to come in, find out that, they had to be invited in by the department. The department refused to do so. I've been trying really hard to get outside help from the FBI. I've been pulling everything I can, every string that I can to convince the FBI to come into my son's case. One thing I did learn, this vehicle is on federal land. It's on BLM land. And I did approach the FBI. They relinquished their responsibility, in my opinion, to the Buckeye Police Department. Say, hey, I said, well, this is on federal land. I thought that if something's on federal land, that's their jurisdiction. He told me, no, it's Buckeye's jurisdiction. I'm like, well, how's that their jurisdiction when it's on your land? But that's the way they're approaching me right now. And I'm really still fighting. I'm still fighting to get these, resources in there from the department. In fact, another thing, I wrote the chief of police, Chief Hall, a striking letter. He couldn't refuse that. He did ask for a case briefing with the FBI based on that letter. In that letter, I wrote a really long letter, and I CC'd the city manager to, certain officials in this letter that would state that my son went missing in the crime scene. We was out there finding a skull in the same area my son's vehicle showed up, remains all over that area. And so to me, it suggests a crime scene. My son went missing in this crime scene, and this needed to be investigated. So, he had no choice but to bring in that case review that my attorney and I asked to be a part of. They didn't do that. They did it behind closed doors, and then came back to me and said, well, Mr. Robinson, the FBI said that they're not coming into your son's case because you, Mr. Robinson, as a father, are doing such a great job on your own. We don't need to. And that's the thing they told me. And, it's so offensive because I am doing the best I can as a father, but I'm begging volunteers for resources, money, GoFundMe, trying to get these equipments out there, trying to keep the volunteers safe, all that kind of stuff at one time while trying to search for my son. And that's also bringing closure to other families. But yet I hear people say things like that to me. And like I don't have feelings. or the fact that I'm just not smart enough to realize that there's a bunch of crap that's been said to me. So now I'm not out here to bash anybody, but I'm definitely going to tell the truth about things like that.
Oh my gosh. I mean, that is just sounds like such a hollow compliment. Like that's a pass off. That's just.
It is. It's a pass off, but I don't really believe the FBI would say anything like that. I just pretty much thinking is just that, hey, look, whatever they presented to the FBI, it was presented in a way that the FBI is not coming in. But I'm going to keep pushing. I'm going to keep pushing that to make sure that happens.
No doubt. And if the Buckeye police asked them to come help, would they have to, or do they still get to decide?
I do not know that part. I do know they had to be invited. Some things I had went to the FBI before, and they told me personally during time for some other issues that happened while searching my son and searching for my son, and they told me they took the report. Ultimately said yes, the Buckeye Police Department had to invite them in. That's what I was told. Right.
Let's find that out. I'm gonna see if we can get someone to answer that. Like, will they then be required to assist? So what can our listeners do to help? What's the highest priority? And now's your chance. I'll put it all in the show notes so everyone can refer to it and have links. But why don't you just go through the list of things we can do?
One thing is sign a petition. One thing when I was starting the website, pleasehelpfinddaniel.com, I put a petition there. The petition was there as the search for my son grew. I started off trying to get the Buckeye Police Department to do more, to push them. It then turns to a passion to try to get some laws changed from that 12 hours when a family know that loved one is missing. Try to get some of that first 24 to 40 hours is very important. Also, it changed, also added to the point of getting the FBI into my son's case. Until now, we all got a voice. Everybody in that petition, it was over 100 and some thousand signatures, is everybody's voice who's really involved, want to be involved in my son's case and want to be heard. That's their voice. It's not a signature. Also, go to the pleasehelpfinddaniel.com where you can donate. It's funding is very important. I see them take these cases where they're using resources. I mean, the resources that I have for almost 11 months has been spent in a day's time for some of the searches they have out there with all the resources they burn to find people. I didn't get that pleasure from the departments to do so. So funding is very important. I had to get forensics work done here from everything that wasn't done from the police department. I had to want to keep the searches going, which I put on pause for now because of funding for most parts. But I have areas that definitely had to be searched in reasonable areas that haven't been searched yet. That's reasonable to my son's disappearance. Also, I have a new. Also, people don't know I filed a 501c3 Daniel Robinson Foundation that is coming up to help other families and things like that, and also help me be able to get this forensics work done. So it's a lot of everything on pleasehelpfinddaniel.com. You can go to the events tab, other ways you can help. I have a flyer distribution. So if I don't want to pass out flyers, I can send flyers to your home. You can call at 803-200-7994 or text me and give me your address. I can send flyers out to you so that you can pass them out in your communities. That goes also along with the ambassador program that I created to get ambassadors to every city in the United States, people who want willing to take charge of those flyers and make sure they get distributed into their city. So, there's a lot going on with that grew from my search for my son and also the search to help other families, all those things going. So go to pleasehelpfinddaniel.com for more things you can do, other ways you can help, put your skill sets in there that will help with the upcoming foundation and things like that.
I'm just astounded at everything you've put into place for people to help. I mean, it's so remarkable. Daniel is so lucky to have you as his father, and whatever I can do, and my listeners, we are going to do it. We're going to make sure we're blasting this information everywhere. And I'm so grateful for your time. Thank you for your service to our country and to you, Daniel. I
appreciate you. One thing I want to quickly say though, I know for a fact there's a lot of good mothers and fathers out there that would do exactly the same thing. I'm only doing what my birthright is. First of all, as a father, I'm a proud father. I'm proud of Daniel, very intelligent guy, but he's my son. So, I'm not only doing what any parent would do. Of course, doing this, I look for your child. You can't be if you don't care about other people also. When they tell you their stories, I get tons of family who don't have a voice and go unheard. and they tell me their stories. It's heartbreaking to know that it's going on in this country, and you can't be a being if you don't try to do something about it.
100%. And it's absolutely no shame to any parent in this situation who can't organize and implement a search and a 501c3 and a website like this. It's a debilitating pain to be in. And everybody has a different skill set, which is why it's so amazing that for those that can do, like you, are now extending it and bringing others alongside you. It's just so inspiring. And I'm thinking all the good things for you and praying and, anything we can do to help. We're so grateful for your time today.
Thank you so much. God bless you for having me on, bringing awareness to my son's case.
Thank you.
Dialogue is a Yellow Tape Media production, audio engineered by Jason Usry and produced, hosted, and edited by me, Rebecca Sebastian. If you love the podcast, please consider becoming a diehard by signing up at patreon.com/dialogue. Other ways to support the show? Follow along on social media. We are at Dialogue Pod across platforms, and you can now watch most episodes on YouTube by subscribing to my channel, Rebecca Sebastian. For more information or to drop me a note, visit rebeccasebastian.com. Until next time, thank you for listening and killing the small talk.